Hi, welcome to Random House's live event today. My name is Taylor. I work in marketing here at Random House, and I also recommend books on my own Bookstagram account, Books with Taylor. Today, I'm going to be joined by Andrea Bartz, who is the author of The Herd, to talk about some of her feminist thriller writing. While we wait for Andrea to join us, I'm going to quickly pin a comment to the top here. Feel free to introduce yourself in the comments or start asking questions. We'll hopefully get to some of those along the way. And it looks like we should have Andrea here. Take just a second to add her. One more second.
Hi.
It worked.
Yay.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there like everyone else. How about you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Great.
As you may have seen on Instagram, I was up all night reading The Herd, which is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Such an incredible read. Actually, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about that book?
Yeah, absolutely. So The Herd, which I conveniently have right by me. The Herd is a thriller that is set in an exclusive all-female co-working space in New York City that is rocked when its glamorous and sort of elegant and a little mysterious founder and CEO disappears the night of an important company announcement. And so it's sort of up to her best friends to try to figure out what happened to her. And, the more they dig, the more they the secrets they uncover. And it really goes deep on themes of commercial feminism and complex female friendships and sort of the sky high expectations that we have for successful, high achieving women in the workforce.
Yeah, it's so smart. Like there's so much packed into there. It's, just a great thriller in terms of the genre, but the idea of a feminist thriller is also so compelling, especially in the current climate today. So what inspired you to write this book?
So I was just trying to think of, I really like setting books inside of sort of these interesting, complex, close-knit groups of people, these sort of like closed door social milieu, if you will. And so I wonder if there's a delay because so sorry if that's happening.
Not on my end, but.
Okay. So, my first book, The Lost Night, was set within sort of the like warehouse parties of hipster Brooklyn. And it was really fun to sort of like take the reader, be the Virgil that takes the reader into that world. And so I was trying to think of an equally interesting setting for my next book. And I sort of randomly had the idea of The Herd, the logo with the HER in purple, because it's all about her. And it made me laugh, and it still makes me laugh. I think it's something that like really you could see that happening. And so the entire thing sprung from there. It was like, what would it look like to have a thriller that was set in one of these like bougie, beautiful, all-female co-working spaces?
Yeah. So is setting the first thing that comes to you when you start a new book?
Pretty much. I start with a hook and I write the entire thing not knowing what will happen. I write without an outline. I sort of figure it out as I go. And so I kind of start with this question of like, what would happen if X? And for The Lost Night, it was what would happen if after one of those crazy warehouse parties, there was a dead body in one of the the lofts. And for this one, it was even simpler, even more simple. It was like, what would it look like to have a thriller that was set in this like beautiful, very desirable space for women. And obviously that gave me a lot of fodder to play with, like you said, feminism and how women relate to each other and sort of internalized misogyny and the backlash against successful women.
Yeah.
So I just sort of am interested in all those things and started writing to explore them.
Yeah. I mean, despite what went down at The Herd, I still find myself really wanting to join one of those spaces. I mean, now more than ever when I'm stuck in my tiny home. But the way that you kind of constructed that place was so alluring. And then you also had these incredibly well-developed, strong female characters. How did you create those from nothing?
So in the first draft, they were all basically like cardboard cutouts. Nobody really had a personality yet. And so I sort of discovered who the characters were as I was writing. But the way that I thought about it, and hopefully this is like woven in subtly enough that it's not obvious, but I knew that I wanted the book to be about sort of the paths that women have toward being acceptable and being, you know, liked and loved, and sort of like the limited options that women have for succeeding. And so I wanted all of the different main characters to sort of represent a different approach to that. And another way to think of that is another, like, each of them sort of represents a role or like the mask or the armor that they have learned since like childhood, makes them palatable and acceptable. And I think a lot of women reading it will sort of empathize with that feeling of like, okay, I've learned that like I'm the funny one and I make people like me by getting everyone laughing. So like that's what I need to do. Or I'm the responsible one. And so in every situation, everyone's going to turn to me, and it is my job to take care of it, because that's what makes me, you know, acceptable and like makes everyone comfortable. And I may not veer from that. And so they sort of represent these different approaches towards the same goal. And it also then kind of set up some fun for playing with what happens when, you know, these women are pushed to the extreme, and this beautiful space of the herd becomes a crucible, and these sort of like perfect veneers that everyone is working so hard to maintain, the sort of Instagram perfect outside, begins to crack and just can't hold up.
Amazing. And so when you're writing a thriller, I'm just curious about your approach to plot and plot development, and kind of how you know when to give which clues, and like how do you start writing a plot?
Yeah. So before I start writing, I always revisit. I have it here too. I always bring visuals.
You're so prepared.
Save the Cat. Yeah. Well, this isn't my first Instagram story, although it's my first with Random House, which is super exciting. But I really like Save the Cat writes a novel, which just helps you understand like the shape that a story will take. You know, stuff like what you need to set up in the first few scenes, and then when you need to kick off the action, and when it needs to have a big twist and take a new direction, things like that. And so even though I write the whole thing without knowing what's happening, I still know like what the next section needs to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so my approach to a mystery, I don't recommend doing a whodunit like without any sense of whodunit or how it's going to work, because it's very stressful. But I just start writing, and really through the first half, I am like metaphorically tossing potential clues and red herrings everywhere I go. It's like I am loading, you know, mouse traps. I am pulling pins out of grenades. I'm just leaving all this stuff that like later might become useful. And that's the fun part. And then I get to about midway through, and it's like, oh crap, like I need to somehow land all of these planes. Like, what have I done? I have so many mysteries. I don't even know what's a red herring and what's real. I don't know how the mini mysteries like feed into the larger mystery. Like, what have I done? And there's a lot of doubt. But yeah, somehow eventually, miraculously, the pieces do start to come together. And then my revision, the next draft, is just making sure like I'm pruning out all the stuff that, all the, you know, the dead ends that it turns out I didn't need, and strengthening the clues and the, you know, the building up of towards the right conclusion. So I'm sort of really discovering it like when, yeah, I'm when people say that they weren't surprised by something, I'm like, oh, interesting, because I was.
I was surprised. And for those of you who are just tuning in, this is Random House Live with Andrea Bartz, author of The Herd and The Lost Night. And we're talking about her writing process. So Andrea, do you write every single day? Is there one spot that you write in? Do you kind of have a set routine for writing?
When I'm on deadline for a manuscript, which I'm currently not, I just turned in my third book, so I get a little break while I wait for notes. But yeah, thanks. But when I'm writing, I don't have a super strict routine, but I have a daily word count goal. And so I know about how much I need to do today, whether it's like 600 words or 800 words. And I prioritize in my day, like sitting down at the computer, and I use the Pomodoro Method, which involves setting a timer for 20 minutes and working for the full 20 minutes. Even if you have no idea what is happening with the scene, even if what you're writing is terrible, even if you're literally writing like, I don't know what happens next. And then when the 20-minute timer goes off, then you take a 5-minute break and you repeat. And I just find that the sort of writing sprint approach really lets me get words on the page, which is the most important thing. So yeah, I work pretty much every day with the exception of like planned vacations and stuff when I'm working on a manuscript. But right now, since I'm between, I'm reading a ton and, free writing and jotting down what might be something for my next book. And so it's a little bit of everything.
Can you give us a little sneak peek as to what the next book is about?
Sure. So the title is still up in the air, but it is also a thriller, but not a whodunit for the first time. So that was different for me. But it's about two globe-trotting, world-traveling best friends, female best friends, who kill a backpacker in self-defense in a foreign country and decide to cover it up and run away rather than trying to, face authorities in a foreign country. And so, once they've done that, it's really about their friendship being tested to the limit and, their sort of doubt and beginning to question like how things really went down. And is my best friend really telling the truth as the walls are sort of closing in on them? So it's dark and it's twisty. And, again, it really is all about complex female friendships, which is what I love writing. But it is a departure in the sense that, who done it from the very first page. So.
Well, it sounds absolutely incredible. There was a great audience question earlier that was asking if there are any other writers or books that you've loved that you've used as inspiration.
Well, one more craft book that I like to recommend. It's kind of heady and hard to get through, but my last visual, I recommend John Truby, The Anatomy of Story. And it's a book, it won't help you plot. He thinks it will help you plot, it won't. But it really can help you. It has exercises that can help you pin down your characters and figure out their motivations and how to really up the emotional stakes and things like that. For me, it's really useful when I'm revising because I have this draft. I have like my vomit draft and it's a mess. And then, I'm beginning to figure out who my characters are. And then I can sit down and do the exercises in the book to really pin down like what makes them different, what purpose does each one serve, and that kind of thing. And then in terms of, fiction that inspires me, there's so much amazing female written thrillers right now. I just feel like we're in such a glut of like beautifully written but fun and complex thrillers. Some that came out recently include Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier, Pretty Things by Janelle Brown. She's a really amazing writer. My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing is just the most fun and like pacey. Talk about pacing. Like that book is like fast and I'm really excited for her next book. He started it. So yeah, obviously Jessica Knoll, Tana French, Gillian Flynn, all the greats. So it's just, I could name female thriller writers I love all day, but that's a few of them.
Those are some amazing recommendations. I know that I'm going to go order several of those after our conversation. There's another great audience question here that asks, how long does it take you to finish writing a book?
So it totally depends if I'm on deadline or not. So when I wrote The Lost Night in its entirety before I did anything with it because I used it to query literary agents and then worked on revisions with my agent. And then she sold it to Random House, to my publisher. And so that took me from the time I started until the time I felt like it was strong enough to show anyone was about 2 years. But when I sold The Herd, my second book, just because of how all of the timing worked out and delays that led to whatever, I sold it based on the idea, the hook, and 2 sample chapters in September 2018, and it was due January 15th. So I wrote the first draft in just over 2 months so that I had a little time to revise it on my own. Yeah. So that was crazy. That was chaos. But I was like, hey, now I know I can do that. Interesting. And then for my third book, I sold it in September and it was due in April. So the first draft I had 4 or 5 months, which is like about right for me. I like writing quickly. I like, building with it every day and not sort of putting it aside. But that was a much better pace for me. And I was a journalist, I was a magazine editor, and I do freelance writing. So for me, working on a deadline is sort of the key to me getting anything done. I'm a total procrastinator until there's a deadline looming, and then I can make it happen.
That little bit of pressure helps a lot. I work the same way.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time, so we keep these pretty short and sweet. But before we go, do you have any other advice for aspiring writers?
I think one piece of advice is, and this is really important and it took me a while to learn, is to not think that you have to have it all figured out before you start writing. Clearly I start with hardly any idea what's going to happen, so I'm proof positive of that. But also, like, I think it's very easy to talk yourself out of an idea when it's just in its infancy, and to say, to tell yourself, like, no, that'll never sell, or, but I don't know how it's going to end, or people are going to totally be over books about X by then. And the truth is, like, you just don't know. And if you wait until the entire idea is totally formed and beautiful, you will never write a book. And so, yeah, when I had the idea for The Lost Night, I was really nervous to write it because it was 2014 and we all like hated hipsters in 2014. We were still in our period of like just loathing the like Brooklynites. And so I was really scared to write an entire book about them. And my friend was just like, take off your editor cap, stop letting your fear stop you and just write and see what happens. And it ended up working out really well because by the time the book came out in 2019, we were sort of interested again in those halcyon days of 2009. So just write and see where it goes. And even if it doesn't work out, like, it's never wasted time because you've learned something, you've improved your craft. And yeah, it feels good. It's how you become a writer. It's just writing.
Amazing. Well, it was so wonderful talking with you today.
Yeah,
all of you who tune in, go out and buy a copy of The Herd and The Lost Night. Great quarantine reading.
Right. Visuals.
Yes, visuals. Well, thank you again, Andrea. I hope that the rest of you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You too. Thanks everyone for joining.